What if the thing everyone warns you about, loneliness, isn't actually the problem? What if the real problem is being surrounded by the wrong people? For years we've been told that humans are social creatures, that we need constant connection, endless conversations, and full contact lists to live a healthy life. Society celebrates busy social calendars and large circles of friends. Being alone is often treated like a red flag, something that must be fixed as quickly as possible. But there is a quiet group of people who have discovered something different. These people started doing something that confused everyone around them. They began stepping back. They stopped answering every call. They stopped showing up to every gathering. They stopped carrying the emotional weight of everyone else's problems. And strangely, instead of feeling empty, they felt relief. If you had met them years ago, you would have seen a very different person. They were the reliable one. The person everyone called when things went wrong. The friend who answered the phone at 2 in the morning. The family member who tried to keep everyone calm when arguments started. The partner who listened to every complaint, every frustration, every story of heartbreak. They were always available, always supportive, always willing to help. And for a long time they believed that this was what being a good person meant. So they listened carefully. They gave advice. They tried to fix problems that were never theirs to solve. But something slowly started to change. They noticed the same conversations repeating again and again. The same people asking for help but never taking the advice they were given. The same emotional crises appearing week after week like a predictable storm. And eventually, something inside them shifted. One day the phone rang, and for the first time, they didn't pick up. They expected guilt. They expected anxiety. They expected some overwhelming sense of responsibility. Instead, something surprising happened. The world became quiet. That quiet moment wasn't weakness, it wasn't cruelty. And it certainly wasn't selfishness. It was the mind doing exactly what it was designed to do. Our brains are constantly monitoring the environment for signs of safety or danger. Every conversation, every relationship, every emotional exchange sends signals to the nervous system. When interactions become consistently draining or stressful, the brain begins to respond in protective ways. Psychologists have spent decades studying this response. One theory explains that when someone experiences repeated emotional overload, the nervous system can move into a state designed to conserve energy. Instead of engaging socially, the body begins to withdraw, creating distance between itself and potential stressors. This isn't a malfunction. It's a survival mechanism. Imagine your energy like a battery that slowly drains throughout the day. Every difficult conversation, every unresolved conflict, every moment spent trying to please others consumes a small portion of that battery. Most people never realize how low their battery has become until the system forces them to recharge. For some individuals, that recharge comes in the form of solitude. But the real question is deeper than that. Why do some people reach this point in the first place? For many, the answer begins much earlier than adulthood. Some people grow up in environments where emotional awareness becomes a necessity. As children, they learn to read subtle cues in the atmosphere around them. They notice the tone of someone's voice, the tension in a room, the small expressions on a parent's face. Before they even understand what emotional intelligence means, they are already practicing it. They learn to predict moods. They learn when to speak and when to stay quiet. They learn how to keep the peace when situations become uncomfortable. Over time, this constant observation sharpens their ability to read people, but it also comes with a cost. When closeness is repeatedly linked with unpredictability or stress, the brain begins to associate emotional distance with safety. This pattern can follow someone into adulthood without them even realizing it. They become the friend who senses tension before anyone else notices it. They become the partner who can detect subtle shifts in behavior long before problems are spoken out loud. To others, this ability might seem like sensitivity. But in reality, it is the result of years of experience. Their brain has simply become very good at recognizing patterns. They notice the friend who only reaches out when they need something. They recognize the family member whose kindness always comes with hidden expectations. They see the cycle of intense affection followed by sudden disappearance in certain relationships. And once you begin seeing these patterns clearly, it becomes very difficult to ignore them. This is the moment when many people begin making difficult decisions. Some relationships slowly fade. Some conversations become shorter. Some invitations are politely declined. From the outside, it may look like withdrawal. But internally, something different is happening. Clarity. The person is no longer reacting automatically to every emotional demand placed on them. Instead, They are observing, evaluating, and deciding where their energy truly belongs. Of course, society doesn't always understand this shift. When someone reduces their social circle, people often label them as distant, antisocial, or disconnected. The assumption is that something must be wrong. But there is an important distinction that rarely gets discussed. There is a difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the painful feeling that arises when someone wants connection but cannot find it. It is the absence of relationships that provide meaning and support. Solitude, on the other hand, is something entirely different. Solitude is chosen. It is the intentional creation of space where the mind can rest, reflect, and recover from the noise of constant interaction. For many people who have spent years absorbing everyone else's emotions, solitude feels less like isolation and more like freedom. The silence allows them to hear their own thoughts again. It gives them the opportunity to understand what they truly want instead of constantly reacting to what others expect from them. Their phone stops buzzing every few minutes. Their schedule becomes lighter. Their emotional energy begins to stabilize. And perhaps for the first time in years they feel calm. But this doesn't mean they have rejected human connection altogether. In fact, the opposite is often true. When someone becomes more selective about the relationships they maintain, the connections that remain tend to become stronger. Instead of dozens of shallow interactions, they focus on a handful of meaningful ones. These are the people who respect boundaries, the people who give as much as they receive, the people who understand that support should flow in both directions. And something remarkable begins to happen. Conversations become more honest. Time spent together becomes more valuable. Emotional energy is no longer constantly drained by conflict or obligation. Instead of chaos, there is balance. Interestingly, long-term studies on human happiness have reached a similar conclusion. Decades of research have shown that well-being is strongly connected to the quality of relationships rather than the quantity. In other words, having 5 genuine connections can be far more beneficial than having 50 superficial ones. This realization changes how many people approach their social lives. They stop measuring their value by the size of their network. They stop forcing themselves into environments that leave them exhausted. Instead, they focus on protecting something much more important: their peace. Protecting your peace doesn't mean becoming cold or indifferent. It doesn't mean abandoning compassion or empathy. It simply means recognizing that your time, attention, and emotional energy are valuable resources. And like any valuable resource, they deserve to be used wisely. The people who understand this lesson often appear quiet on the surface. They may spend more time alone than others expect. They may keep their circle small, but inside, they are not empty. They are stable. They have learned to create a life where calmness replaces chaos, where genuine connection replaces constant obligation. And perhaps most importantly, they have learned that not everyone deserves unlimited access to their inner world. Because once you understand the cost of giving your energy to the wrong people, you begin to appreciate the power of giving it to the right ones. So if you have ever stepped back from certain relationships and felt an unexpected sense of relief, if you have ever chosen a quiet evening alone over a crowded room filled with shallow conversations, if you have ever wondered whether something was wrong with you for valuing peace more than popularity, there is a strong possibility that nothing is wrong at all. You may simply be someone who has learned an important lesson earlier than most. But here is the question that few people talk about. When someone becomes highly selective about who they allow into their life, something interesting begins to happen. Their circle becomes smaller, but their standards become higher. And eventually, a moment arrives when someone new appears. Someone different. Someone who doesn't drain energy, but adds to it. Someone who doesn't create chaos, but brings calm. The real mystery is not why people choose solitude. The real mystery is this: when someone has spent years protecting their peace, what kind of person is finally worthy of being invited back into that quiet space?